Welcome to the #1 podcast covering Michigan State basketball. The Final Four is not on the schedule. Join Rod and me, Eric, as we dive deep into the Spartans to get you prepared for every game. Subscribe today for in-depth recruiting updates and fantastic interviews with today's important college basketball personalities like Robbie Hummel.
Thanks for having me. I have listened to your guys' podcast numerous times on drives throughout any Midwestern Big Ten city. So I am big fans of your guys' work.
Jay Billis.
And next time, hey, if anybody in Michigan wants a December tea time, call me. You wimps won't show up, but I'll be there. I'll be there and play in the cold. And Izzo will be in front of the fire with hot chocolate.
Coaches Thomas Kelly.
No problem. Glad to be back, man. Glad to be back.
Mike Garland.
You just can't sit there and trade twos for threes. You can't do it. You're gonna lose. Coming down the stretch, you're gonna lose.
And more. You won't find better coverage of Spartan hoops than you will get here. For both the casual and hardcore fan, come along as we take you for a green and white ride. Hey everybody, it's Eric alongside Rod, here to discuss MSU's upcoming game against the Rutgers Scarlet Knights at the Breslin Center on Sunday. A quick update that we are trying to resolve still, the problem at Spotify. Obviously, you're listening to this, you found other ways of finding the show, but unfortunately, these big companies don't exactly have the customer response for producers of content. So if you want to hassle them a little bit on our behalf, that'd be great. Also, if you subscribe to the new show that they've created that has all the episodes that doesn't have any ratings, please leave a rating, 5 stars, and written review. It would be helpful for the algorithms. If you'd like to support the show, as always, you can head on over to thefinalfourisnottheschedule.com/support, or if you're lazy, tffinots.com/support. There you can find the necessary links. And if you want to give us a gift of, 2 or 3 Bitcoin, we're more than happy to try and figure that out. So you can email me at eric@tffinots.com and we can work something out. Well, Michigan State has certainly dug themselves quite the hole, Rod, in the Big Ten race. At 1-4, tied for last place with the Michigan Wolverines. They need to really get rolling, and a natural place is returning home against the lowly Rutgers team. Rutgers comes into the game 9-6, 1-3 in the Big Ten, ranked 86 in KenPom and 91st in the net. They're coming off a home court win over Indiana for their first victory, but it's kind of back to the old Pikiell team because they are a terrible offensive team. They rank 251st overall, and defensively, they're 7th. So on offense, they don't shoot well, 28.6% from 3 and 334th from 2, which is hard to imagine they're that bad. They hit only 2/3 of their free throws, and they're not very good offensive rebounding team, which is a little different from the past teams who were always very solid on the boards. So this team's only 102nd on offensive rebounding rate and 112th in turnover percentage. So they don't do a very good job hanging on to the ball. So they're just really bad offensively. As mentioned, defensively, they're excellent. They're number 12 against twos. They're 5th in block percentage, 14th in opponents turning the ball over. They're 85th against threes, which kind of puts them sort of middle of the pack in 3-point attempts allowed. And the strange weakness for this team, which I guess goes along with the offensive rebounding, is that they're really bad defensive rebounding team at 272nd. And we've certainly seen Michigan State with the ability to offensively rebound. But strangely, despite Rutgers having all those problems, they play really fast. They're 33 in length of offensive possession. And because of their defensive acumen, we'll say, they're really good at preventing teams from getting shots up, and so their opponents are playing exceptionally slow. 357th in length of opponent possession, which that has got to be.
It's right down near the bottom.
I mean, that's got to be the last, right?
Right down near the bottom.
The only thing is, this is a very interesting Rutgers team. We talked about this preview before the season started, that we really didn't know what this team was going to look like because they lost a lot of big parts from last year. We didn't expect them to fall this far. They obviously have next year. They have good recruiting classes lined up. But for this year, it's pretty ugly. I guess you just kind of back to the old Rutgers.
And that's why for starters, Rutgers is not a place where the basketball coach can be under a lot of fire, especially when he's had the unprecedented success that Steve Pikiell's had.
Right.
But what's making this easier, I think, for the Rutgers fan base to deal with is that they know they've got that recruiting class coming in led by Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper, who are 2 of the top 5 players in America. They have other guys too, but it's those 2 primarily. Now, we can debate what that's actually going to mean on the floor for Rutgers next year, but there's no question that enthusiasm mostly in the program surrounds that as opposed to what this current team is doing. They really got hurt by the portal, which is funny to say about a power conference school because you don't usually expect that to happen. Usually power schools are adding guys, not losing them. It can happen, of course, but you know what I'm saying.
Well, especially you look at teams, I was just going to say that you look at teams that have stability at the coaching staff, and as far as we can tell, a coaching staff that seems to work well with and have good chemistry with players.
Yep.
So for that to happen is really unusual.
It was very strange. And especially they lost Paul Mulcahy and Cam Spencer. Spencer was a little easier to understand because he was a portal addition last year, just a one-year guy. So that was a little easier. He did enough last year with steals that he racked up, but especially his perimeter shooting, that I think he knew he was going to be a hot commodity on the open market. He ended up at UConn. I would imagine he's getting improved NIL. And he's also got a chance to play for a national contender. So that one made more sense. But losing Mulcahy was really strange to me because he was a Jersey kid. He's a 4-year guy there. And of course, obviously had the extra COVID year that he opted to take, just not at Rutgers. And his relationship seems so good with even early in his career when he wasn't yet a fully formed player. Pikiell really used him, leaned on him. So, and everything Mulcahy said, even after he transferred, was, I loved my time there, blah, 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 which again leads one to wonder, was that pretty much exclusively NIL driven? He ended up at Washington, and I don't know that it's been quite the year he probably expected. But if they had those two guys, there's a completely different team.
Yeah.
Because both of those guys could shoot. Mulcahy was a great distributor. He made them better offensively just by being on the floor. And yet they didn't lose anything defensively with them. They're both really good defensive players. So, and as fifth-year guys, you would have expected really good things. So that was a really critical blow to this year's team. It kind of put them behind the 8 ball to begin with. But I didn't expect the struggle to be quite this much in terms of the offensive end. They just don't do anything well. And to see them struggling this much in, shooting the ball and not turning it over and all of that.
Especially.
But to not at least have that, the worst Pikiell teams couldn't throw the ball in the ocean, could at least go get it. And that's how they remained competitive, was they were really good in terms of generating second chances. This team's not doing that at a very good clip. The defensive rebounding is awful. It has occasionally been bad in the past because Rutgers tends to be a high shot block team, as they are this year. And so oftentimes, it stands to reason when your big men are taking a lot of chances to block shots and very active, they will more often than another team, let's say, be out of position to get a defensive rebound. But it's a really bad number even by those standards. Otherwise, though, a very good defensive team. I mean, they're great against twos. As I said, they block a lot of shots. They generate a lot of turnovers, which has not always been their MO, and they're not really a ball hawking kind of team. Most of their turnovers are non-steal turnovers. But I think some of that is because they've been so good that, as you talked about, they're forcing opponents to use up so much of their shot clock that sometimes mistakes happen. If you don't end up getting an early or early-ish shot, sometimes that possession's going to end up in a bad way without you getting any shot at all because you just make a mistake. You had to hold on to the ball longer than you wanted to. But really good there other than in terms of rebounding, and just as bad, the converse of that on the offensive end. So it's added up to I think a disappointing season. And, it remains to be seen if they can find a way to turn it around, but a lot will have to change.
Yeah. Just to put a bow on that, with Cam Spencer, his leading scorer for UConn, averaging 15.4 points a game, shooting 45% from 3, 51% from the line or from the field.
Could they use that? Yeah.
They could really use that for sure. What a difference that.
Yeah,
that
he's
sort
had
of,
a very good year at UConn, that's for sure. But that meant, losing those two guys in the portal and then Caleb McConnell graduating. So those three guards who were a really big part of their success the last several years, not just 1 year, at least for two of those guys, all gone.
Well, I guess we can get through go over the starters. This is brought to you by the Brothers Suggest Your Gutters. Again, a reminder, it is January. There's snow everywhere, but they are still going to be out there fixing your gutters. If you have leaky gutters, and you've noticed more now, I was just listening to talk about some business they were at, fixing up the gutters that were leaking and pouring into right by their foundation, getting into the basement, kind of messing up a bunch of the stuff they got in their basement. So if you've got those problems, downspouts or whatever it might be, rusted out, the Brothers Suggest Your Gutters can fix those things. They can also put in heated gutters, which are a fairly affordable way of keeping the ice and snow from building up in your gutters. You can find them at brothersgutters.com. They go out any weather. They'll go out right now and take care of things. If you're on the west side of the state, Kurt and his team can help set you up. Or on the east side of the state, Greg and his team can also take care of you in the Metro Detroit area. So you want to check them out. 10% off if you mention Final Four for your estimate at the Brothers Suggest Your Gutters, sponsoring the player that Michigan State needs to keep in the gutter. And Michigan State has generally, especially at home, been pretty good at keeping those players in the gutter. And Rod will mention who that is after we get through these players. We'll begin with the starters and Derek Simpson, 6'3" sophomore. Simpson emerged last year as a young guard to watch, but is now become a key guy for this team. He kind of reminds me a little of, I'm trying to think who else used to be on Rutgers who was their number 0. I can't remember his name, but he looked a little bit like him. I can't think of his name right now. But he's averaging 9.7 points a game, leads the team in assists at 3 a game, but not quite a 2-to-1 turnover assist ratio. He is shooting 33, 30, and 85 and gets about 3.7 free throws a game.
I think they hoped for more out of him because he was really good toward the end of last season, his freshman year. And I think it gave them some optimism in the offseason that, well, if he continues developing on the trajectory we saw his first year, this isn't going to be that bad. You know, well, it hasn't worked out that way. And I think the fact that he really hasn't been able to elevate his game as a shooter or a playmaker, still good defensively, but on the offensive end, he hasn't been able to do much to get markedly better. That's been part of the problem. You know, still potential to be sure, but I think they hoped for more.
Yeah. So next would be Austin Williams. He's a transfer from Florida International, 6'4" guard. Started the last game for Rutgers, averaging 5.5 points a game on 56, 36, and 50 shooting. He's not a very good assist turnover ratio at 1-3, which is the opposite way you want it to be.
Not your playmaker. He would also rate as their sniper with those kind of shooting numbers, which are
36%.
Okay, they're not bad, but yeah, he hasn't played a ton. You know, they just started him. It's his third start of the year, but the fact they got a win with that lineup suggests to me we're probably likely to see it again on Sunday.
Next would be Mawat Mag. He's 6'7". He's the one who tore his ACL against Michigan State when they played in at Madison Square Gardens, I think.
Yep.
He's missed a bunch of games, but he's been good when he's out there. He's averaging 10.7 points a game and 55.1 rebounds a game, shooting 36, 29, and 67.
Yeah. Those numbers don't make your eyes pop, but I'm telling you,
he can be streaky, I feel like.
He can, and with last season and now this season, I'm pretty convinced that even beyond what the numbers would suggest, he is a guy, when he's in the lineup, Rutgers is just better. I mean, last year you can directly trace their complete falling off a cliff to the point where they didn't actually make it into the tournament field, which at the time he was hurt would have seemed laughable where they were. You could directly trace it to that. Now, was that the only reason? Probably not, but I think he's one of those guys that's just a connector for them. On this team, he's even more important because he's a guy who can actually score at least a little bit. And they just don't have enough of that to go around.
Yeah.
So anywhere they can get points is a big deal. So if he could stay healthy, maybe there's a little bit of team improvement coming.
Yeah, he does that sort of slinky sort of athleticism that certainly helps him both ends of the court.
Even though the 3-point shooting numbers are not good so far this year, he is capable of getting on a roll. As you said, I've seen him do that.
Yep.
So yeah, he's a good player for them.
And for all those you screaming into your podcast player, that the guy I was thinking of is Geo Baker is who I was thinking Derek Seed sort of reminded me of, former Rutgers player.
Maybe.
And he's kind of like a poor man's Baker.
You know what? I'll say one thing that they share in common thus far, which is something Simpson's going to hope changes. Geo Baker was a good player who could have been great if he'd ever developed consistency with his jumper.
Yeah.
And so that's a key for Simpson as well.
So moving on to the starting lineup, Andre Hyatt, 6'6" senior, averaging almost 12 points a game. So he's leader of the team for scoring. 5.8 rebounds a game, shoots 39, 35, and 77.
This is the guy to keep in the gutter. Nice season. They brought him in via the portal last year, and he was okay mostly. He was operating as a reserve, and then when Mott got hurt, I believe, if I remember correctly, that's when he got elevated into the starting lineup. But I think he just struggled to find consistency. They had brought him in as a real undersized 4. He's only 6'6", but he's kind of a bigger guy, could compete on the boards, and yet they thought he also had the ability to stretch defenses, but I think he had problems finding consistency on the jumper. It's better this year. And so he's able to be a multi-level scorer. He can rebound, obviously, from that position. So an important player, and truthfully, you take everything in consideration. Their best player this year, I think.
And finally, rounding out the starting 5 is Cliff Omoruyi, 6'10" senior, averaging 10.3 points a game, 9.1 rebounds a game, shooting 50, 0, and 63. And he was really good last year, and he also does average 3 blocks a game, too.
Better than 3 blocks, actually. It's close to 3.5. He's really been disappointing. And I haven't seen every Rutgers game, so I can't speak to whether it is mostly him or mostly that the guys around him just aren't as good as what he had his first 3 seasons. I suspect,
right, yeah.
I suspect it's a little of both, but maybe more of the latter. But here's the thing. Last year, I thought he's gotten better every year up until this season. You could see steady improvement every year from him. And last year, I thought what he really added to his game is he started to become a real weapon as a low post scorer. Like, he would consistently make good rudimentary moves. I mean, he's not Zach Randolph in terms of footwork, but knew what he was doing down there and was able to convert at a pretty good clip. And I thought that made a difference. That helped him go up another level as an offensive player. This year, it's not happening. 50% from the floor for a perimeter player, let's say, is very good. And for your average player is okay. But for a big man, and especially a big man who people thought coming into the season would be right there among the best, not named Zach Edey in the league, it's a disappointing number. You would expect him.
Yeah.
I didn't go back and look at his career numbers, but I'm going to guess he was probably a lot closer to 60% than 50% over his career. And so shooting 50%, it can be a sign that you're being forced to take on more than you're capable of. That can be one indicator, which wouldn't entirely be his fault. But for whatever reason, it's not happening the way I think they expected. If Rutgers was going to be really competitive this year, he needed not only to maintain what he did last season, but I think take another step up and maybe become a guy that they counted on for, 18 points a night. That kind of thing. Double-digit rebounds. None of that has happened. The one thing that's, even the rebounding's down a little bit, because I think he was a double-double guy last year.
He was 13.2 points and 9.6 rebounds a game last year.
Close.
Yeah.
So he's down more than 3 points a game. He's down about half a rebound a game. That's actually significant when you expect a guy to actually be improving as he gets a year older. Instead, it's going in reverse. The one thing that's still there, though, dominant shot blocker. Now, we talked about this earlier, part of the reason Rutgers struggles in defensive rebounding the way that they do is their shot blockers are so active, they put themselves out of position. So he's somewhat guilty of that, but still, 3.5 blocks is 3.5 blocks.
Certainly going to be disruptive.
Yeah.
So moving on to the reserves then. Noah Fernandez, 5'11" grad transfer from UMass. He started every game, but the last game he's averaging 7.9 points a game on 34, 27, and 87 shooting. He's also the best assist to turnover guy, or second best, I guess, with a 3-to-2 assist to turnover ratio.
Yeah, 31-21 on the season in raw numbers. He was considered a big portal addition. They got him from UMass. He had a track record of being a very good perimeter shooter and also a guy who maybe wasn't enough of a point guard to be your permanent full-time guy, but certainly could pitch in and out. Well, I think he's done the second part of that okay, but the shooting has been nowhere remotely close to where they had hoped it would be. They added him, actually, I believe, before Spencer and Mulcahy decided to go. They got him really quickly, if I remember correctly, in the portal. And I think the thought was, oh, well, this is a great, first guard off the bench who can come in and keep adding to our shooting improvement while the other two guys leave, and he comes in and he's shooting sub 30%. It's a big problem. I mean, if he can't find his way out of this slump and become a more reliable jump shooter, I'd struggle to see how Rutgers improves a whole hell of a lot offensively. Yeah.
I mean, it would not be surprising, I think, to either of us that we find Rutgers at the bottom of the Big Ten at the end of the season. I mean, there's certainly a lot of teams that might be there, but they could be battling.
I mean,
bottom. They'll be playing the first day, I think, almost for sure.
Make a point. I mean, Minnesota, I still think is near the bottom of the league in terms of talent, but
they're like 3-2 or something.
They found their way to some wins, and they're back to where they were. I don't think they're as good as they were 2 years ago, honestly, but they're back closer to that in terms of how well they compete.
Yeah.
And that's, sometimes that's a big part of the battle, especially in the Big Ten where there's a lot of bad teams. I think that I don't expect Rutgers to finish last. I think they'll find a way to avoid that, but they're going to be near the bottom. This is going to be the worst year they've had in probably since, I'd have to look at it, maybe 2017, 2018, somewhere in there.
Games a year.
Yeah.
So moving on to Gavin Griffith, 6'7" freshman, highly regarded recruit, averaging 6.7 points a game on 35, 25, and 53 shooting. So again, someone who's not hitting from outside.
Yeah, and the thing is, he was a top 50 recruit. So heavy expectations, and his strength was shooting coming out of high school. So this was, and I know we must have talked about this in our preseason Rutgers preview. If they were going to get even close to what, and it's not like they were a gangbuster shooting team as a whole from three last year, but they were, they had guys who could certainly hurt you, right? If they were going to be anywhere close to that this year, Fernandez and Griffiths had to be what they had to meet expectations, and neither has. They're both sub 30. Griffith's case, you're talking about a true freshman, a lot easier to write off because he's making an adjustment to big time basketball, et cetera, but still disappointing because I think they had hopes that he was the kind of guy that could step right in and really be an immediate, and he's scoring almost 7 points a game. It's not like he's doing nothing, but I think they thought he'd do more.
Then we get to Jamichael Davis, 6'2" freshman guard, averaging 5.4 points a game on 34, 28, and 43 shooting. So similar numbers to Griffiths.
Bad shooting. They like his future. They like him defensively. If he's going to be really good, obviously he's got to find a way to get those shooting numbers hiked up.
Next would be Anton Wolk, 6'9", 250-pound sophomore, averaging 4 points a game and 3.3 rebounds a game in 15 minutes, shooting 59, 25 and 41.
Yeah, the 25 should not be taken. He's 1 for 4. He doesn't shoot a lot of threes. But he's actually, I thought this was true last year, and it's been mostly true this year. A pretty good quality backup at the center because, well, he doesn't have the game the starter has. He's a big guy. He came from a football background. I believe he had D1 offers as a football recruit, opted to play basketball. He's a big guy that can move. And, Rutgers has proven to be able to get a lot out of guys like him in Pikiell's tenure there. So I think it was a good choice that he made. And for the moment, he's giving them a solid backup play at that spot. Next year will be interesting to see if they look to elevate him into the starting lineup and how that goes. But, decent backup at this stage.
Sure. And finally, Oscar Palmquist, 6'8", senior, averaging 3 points a game and 1.7 rebounds a game in 12 minutes, shooting 42 and 28, 77. So everybody's in the 20s pretty much.
Yeah, he's been around, it seems like a long time. And it's hard for me to believe
he's forever.
His 5th year, came in. He and Dean Reber, who's no longer around, came in the same class. They were both kind of stretch 4 type players who had some good size, but reportedly could hit from the perimeter. And it just never fully worked for either one of them. Still not working for Palmquist the way they'd like it because that 3 conversion number is not good enough.
All right, so now we'll go to our who for Michigan State is going to be clean the glass the best. Brought to you by the Squeegee Squad. Currently, I'm at 3-0, and I'm starting to feel a little fat and sassy here, Rod. But you get to first pick this time for a game where it looks like it from on paper. We've said this many times. It seemed like this season, Michigan State should have a big edge on the glass. So who do you pick as the top rebounder for Michigan State?
Mady Sissoko.
Yeah,
it's not going to rock the boat. The thing about him is let's all the heat he takes from certain quarters of the fan base. He is in a run of games where he has been remarkably consistent as a rebounder.
Yeah, that's
especially true. Defensively, which is where they need him to show up.
Yeah, I think no one was good defensively against Northwestern. I feel like I think he finished with 5. But yeah, all the games before that, previously, he'd been, if not double, just kind of knocking the door, like 8 or so. So He's been very, very effective. It seems like the logical choice for the second. Well, I had Cooper last time I got it, so I'm going to go with Malik Hall this time. And just because I feel like he's going to have that same energy that he brought to the Illinois game. And this is there are going to be a lot of bad shots, but I don't think there'll be a ton from outside. So I think there'll be a lot of more sort of inside. So I think definitely like a Hall, Cooper, or Sissoko are going to be the best rebounders of this game. So I'm going to go with Malik Hall. And again, that's brought to you by the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. They do fantastic work cleaning your windows, whether you're just residential, commercial, high rise. They do it all. So that makes them unusual for lots of window cleaning services. So they can really handle everything for you. You can get a hold of them at Squeegee Squad at Grand Rapids. The link is below. You can get 15% off if you mention a rebound, at checkout when you get your estimate. They can take care of your windows. They can wash your house. They get up on the ladders. They get things nice and close. They come inside. They clean your screens. They can clean your windowsills. They give you estimates for everything. So they'll come in and just give you an estimate for all things. Then you can sort of decide what you want to do and sort of what works for your schedule. They will go out in any weather. They're even out here in January and February. They'll be out there cleaning stuff up. So you want to get your glass cleaned, contact the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. So moving on to the 5 keys of the game, brought to you by Nudge Printing. Nudge Printing is Gabe and Brittany, fantastic Spartans. They were instrumental in the Spartan Strong effort to help shooting victims at Michigan State. They have high-quality screen printing apparel, both Spartan and other collegiate apparel. You can find it all at nudgeprinting.com. 20% off. You mentioned Final Four at checkout when you make your order. They're sponsoring the trivia question, which we'll have in about a week. But you can't go wrong by going to Nudge Printing. They are the favorite apparel of everyone in my family, and I continue to get more and more of it because it's so comfortable, well priced. And if you want to even have a fundraiser or you want to do something for your business or your school group, you can go to fabricatedcustoms.com, and they will set up everything for you. They'll do all the billing. They do all the shipping. They can set up a store where they can just sell whatever it is that you want. It was super easy when I used it for our high school, so I would highly recommend that. There's almost no work that you have to do. They'll even do the design for you. So Gabe is really easy to work with. And I think, probably in a little bit, we're going to open up our own store just for a few weeks and kind of go do that for if you want to get our apparel again with our logo. So anyway, moving on to 5 keys of the game. We'll begin with the first one, which is, groundbreaking. It's to win. Michigan State's 1-4. And so now, you're playing a team that at home you should have for all rights and purposes, you should beat.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously as simplistic as it gets, but at this stage, Michigan State needs, I don't think it's too much. Oftentimes, I say, they need to win this game. It's an overstatement. Not an overstatement here. They need to win this game. Start getting back in the win column, rebuilding that, getting back on that positive momentum that they had over that 5-game win streak prior to Northwestern. And there's the opportunity is right there in front of them. You're at home playing a team that you're just flat out better than. You ought to win. And frankly, you ought to win without a whole hell of a lot of trouble.
Right. It should not be in too much doubt, even at halftime, I would think. You should be.
Well, I would say that we're not nervous in the last 4 minutes. I'll give them that much
exactly.
wiggle room.
Yeah. For sure. And this is the one where if you lose this game, it's not a terrible loss, but it's kind of a bad loss. I mean,
it's a bad loss. At home, it's a bad loss.
At home, right, exactly.
Losing to Wisconsin at home, probably not bad.
The way they lost, bad, but
but not in terms
on
of what
paper,
it means.
It doesn't look bad.
This would be bad.
Yeah. Second key to the game is perimeter shooting. Michigan State was a poor 5 for 19 from 3 against Illinois, including 0 for 8 in the last 8 shots. They were decent before that, but so they've got to they
were good. They were 5
more consistent.
They were 5 for 11. So
yeah, to start.
So they're 5 of their first 11 and then 0 for 8. That was 5 for 11 into the second half. They were only 3 for 8 at halftime, so they hit 2 of their first 3 after the break, and then they just wouldn't fall.
That's when they went ahead.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm not of the belief that a shaky whatever it was last 10 minutes or so of one game is a sign that they've suddenly lost an ability to make jumpers again. I think the evidence has become reasonably clear that this might not be, well, it's not as good a three-point shooting team as last year's was, which was an exceptional group.
Right.
It's pretty good. They have multiple guys who can hurt you. And that's all you ask for. That said, you don't want to see it start to let doubt creep into the collective minds of the team. So it would be nice to see shots falling at the Breslin and just shake that right out of their heads, and you don't lose any sleep over it.
Right. And that kind of leads a little bit into the next key to the game in transition. This poor shooting Rutgers group gives you opportunity to get out and run, which gives you oftentimes very good opportunities to get threes in transition, which is, especially like Jaden Akins is sort of like his specialty.
Yep. It's also where you can get Malik Hall sometimes some more comfortable shots as a trailing 3.
Right.
Which he's a little more confident in, I think, than in standard half-court offense. Here's the thing. What adds up, Rutgers historically under Pikiell has been very, very, very difficult to run on. And I'm not saying they won't be in this one, but what is a little different, they've usually been a bad shooting team. So a lot of misses, right? But they've also usually coupled that with very, very good offensive rebounding. This team doesn't. So if you're getting a lot of misses, as we expect, and you're also getting a lot of defensive rebounds, which I expect, and hopefully clean ones, there should be some chances to get into transition, maybe more than we're used to seeing in a typical game against Rutgers. And anytime, look, this is a number 7 defense in KenPom in the country. So any easy baskets you can get where you're not having to slug it out in 5-on-5 in the half court is a big deal. It's a positive.
Yeah. And I think as we saw in the Baylor game too, even though I think there's this tendency to sort of leak out for the guards and try and get the transition going a little bit sooner, you're much better making sure you secure the rebound and then run, and you still have plenty of time to do some real damage like they did against Baylor. So anyway, I think that's been sort of their problem against these smaller teams that are poor rebounding teams. I think it just seems like they think, oh, well, rebounding would be no problem, so we can sort of not check people as much as
and
we
you
have
have
before
to look,
and put a body on them.
Probably the best transition team Tom Izzo's ever had was that group, around the 99-2000 period. Yeah. And if you think about who the starting wings were, or at least some of that, or at least the two best wings, were Charlie Bell and Mo Peterson. You think about those guys flying up and down the court, running lanes on the, on opposite sidelines, and how great they were at getting in transition and finishing. But also remember how great those guys were as rebounders. You can do both.
Number 4 key to the game is second chances. We've already mentioned Rutgers' terrible defensive rebounding group, and Michigan State has been, I'd say, better than average offensive rebounding. And
yes,
so this may be an opportunity to pull out some extra buckets. And if you shoot 40-50% from the field, that's going to be hard for a team that's as bad offensively to recover from.
Yeah, and look, Rutgers is the real deal in terms of defending against twos. They've been not quite as good against threes, but they also don't give up a ton of attempts. So if Michigan State, if that holds and Michigan State is not quite themselves in terms of shooting percentage, second chance baskets will be really important. And there should be opportunities for it.
And the fifth and final key to the game is poise. So Rutgers forced a lot of turnovers. They don't get into you as far as like getting a lot of steals and stuff, but Michigan State has not had a turnover problem really much of the season. I think the most they've had is 15, and that was a game where I think they forced 17 or 18 their opponent. So you don't obviously want to have a huge disparity here because Rutgers has trouble scoring, so you don't want to give them easy baskets clearly, but also extra opportunities for a team that stinks.
Yeah, and last year they were a little more of a ball hawking group. Spencer was really good.
Yeah, and Spencer.
Caleb McConnell, was really good. They had a lot of guards who reminds me a little bit of Michigan State's group, where they weren't gambling or anything, but they just quick hands, playing sound defensively, ended up with a lot of forced turnovers. That's not really this team. They're still generating a lot of turnovers, but it's other people making mistakes. So traveling, throwing the ball away, it's those kind of things rather than steals. The good news is that means Rutgers, even with that high turnover percentage against number, they're not getting into transition with it, because this is a bad offensive team. You want to make them earn it in the half court, right? You want to give them easy baskets. They're not getting those, but they're still generating, possessions where you're not getting a shot. So I think it's important that Michigan State remain where they've been, as you pointed out, most of the year, not making an excessive amount of mistakes. Do that, and I think it's going to be hard for Rutgers to win.
This certainly seems like the kind of game where Michigan State brings their good defensive effort. They could hold this team to around 50 points. And then you think that's a really good chance Michigan State wins that game. I mean, pretty easily, right? I mean, that's
the only mitigating factor there would be pace. And as you mentioned at the outset, it was shocking to me. Rutgers is 33rd in the country in length of offensive possession. That means they're getting shots up really fast. You would think that given how bad they've been in terms of shooting the ball, and they would also be like, okay, well, this is not working. Maybe we need to slow it down, but they're not. So if they're doing that, and somehow Michigan State is also able to play fast, despite what Rutgers typically does to opponents, that would be the only caveat to, this could be a game where if you play really well at that end, you might have a chance at, holding an opponent into the 50s, which doesn't happen that much anymore.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
Yeah, you kind of feel like in this game, if Michigan State gets 60 plus shot attempts, that their chances are pretty good.
I would agree.
At winning this game.
I would agree.
All right. Well, I think we'll turn it over there. We'll see you guys after the game. Looking forward to being back in the Breslin after getting this little ice cream sandwich. So until next time, the Final Four is on the schedule. Go green.